It all started on an ordinary Friday morning, a day like any other, the kind of morning where the world outside felt still and predictable, like the calm before a storm you didn't know was coming. I was sitting at my desk, sipping on a cup of coffee that had long since lost its warmth, staring at my computer screen. Emails, notifications, work deadlines. It was the usual grind. Nothing special. Nothing strange. That's when the message popped up. It wasn't from Jason, my husband. It was from one of his coworkers. I had met a few of them over the years, but none really stood out. This one, Chris, had been on a business trip to Austin for a few days. I didn't think much of it when I saw his name in the notification. At first, I just assumed it was another one of those, "Hey, I'm in Austin" check-ins. I opened the message, my eyes barely registering the subject line, "Caught your wife out." I laughed softly under my breath, figuring it was some kind of joke. I clicked it open, my fingers typing a quick reply in my head. "Haha, what's this about?" And then I saw the photo. It wasn't a funny picture. It wasn't some silly **T of a conference room or a random snap of the city skyline. No, this was different. In the photo, Allison, my best friend, my confidant, was sitting at a bar. She looked as beautiful as always. Her hair styled perfectly, her smile lighting up her face. Nothing about the photo screamed betrayal, but it was the context that made my stomach twist. She was sitting next to a man I didn't recognize. His hand was resting casually on her forearm, and between them, 2 cocktails sat, untouched. The warmth of the bar's low light contrasted with the coldness I felt creeping up my spine. The caption, short and to the point, read, "Didn't know your wife hangs out with Derek from marketing now." I blinked. I stared at the picture. My pulse began to quicken, my hands gripping my phone tighter than I'd ever held it before. Derek from marketing? Who was that? I tried to place him, but I couldn't. I wasn't really familiar with the details of Jason's coworkers. It was his job, not mine. Still, there was something in the way he was sitting so close to Allison that set my instincts off. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling building inside me. It was just a business dinner. That's what I told myself. But then I remembered. The night she had left, she had said it was a work meeting. A meeting that had somehow lasted well into the night. I remembered the tone of her voice when she spoke. So sure, so confident. I trusted her. I had always trusted her. She would never do anything to hurt Jason, would she? But then this picture, this small fragment of reality, began to unravel everything. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to feel. I just knew I had to talk to her. I forwarded the photo to Allison with a quick message. "Is this you? With Derek from marketing?" The response came instantly, almost too quickly. "Yes, it's me. Don't worry, it's just a client. We were discussing a project. I swear, nothing weird is going on. It was just a bad angle, that's all." I stared at the message, rereading her words over and over again. Nothing weird is going on. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. She was my friend, my ally. We had shared so many good times, so many laughs. There had never been a reason for doubt before. But the way her hand was resting on his arm, was that the kind of thing you did during a work meeting? The image kept flashing in my mind. Just a bad angle. The words echoed in my head, as if they were supposed to erase the uncertainty I was feeling. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. There had to be. Something in the way she responded felt off, like she was trying a little too hard to reassure me. I wasn't used to her being this defensive. I sat there, frozen. The office was quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the sound of typing keyboards, the murmur of people speaking in the hallway. Everything felt distant, as if I was suddenly detached from the world around me. My thoughts were spinning, and I could feel my heart racing. How had I not seen it? How had I missed the signs? I began to replay the past few weeks in my mind, like scenes from a movie. There had been little things, small oddities that I had chalked up to nothing more than stress or busy schedules. She had been coming home late more often. Her phone. She had started leaving it face down on the table, something she never did before. When she would check it, she would quickly swipe away notifications before I could see them. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she had just been dealing with work stress or had something going on with one of her other friends. But now, with this photo in front of me, the dots began to connect in a way that I couldn't ignore. The perfume, the one that wasn't mine. It had lingered on her coat a few weeks ago, a smell so strong that I couldn't place it. I had asked her about it, and she had brushed it off with a laugh, telling me it was from a colleague at work. But now I wasn't so sure. There was also the new colleague, Scott. She had talked about him a lot lately. At first, it had seemed like harmless conversation, but as time went on, I couldn't help but notice the fondness in her voice whenever she mentioned him. Why was she always talking about him? Was I just overthinking things? And then there was the moment when I walked into the living room one night to find her on the phone, whispering softly, her tone urgent. She quickly hung up as soon as I entered the room. It felt wrong, but again I had pushed the thought aside, convincing myself it was nothing. But now, in the aftermath of seeing this photo, everything seemed like it had been a warning sign. I looked back at the photo of Allison and Derek. The distance between us, between the life we had built, seemed to stretch further with every passing second. I could feel the walls closing in on me, suffocating me with doubt. But I had to be sure. I had to know if I was just imagining things, if I was overreacting, or if this was truly the beginning of something more. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone again. This time, I wasn't asking for her reassurance. This time, I needed answers. I need to know, I typed slowly. Why didn't you tell Jason about this client meeting? There was a long pause before the response came. I didn't think it was important. We were just talking business. Just business. The words seemed so innocent. But the doubt was already planted, growing like a weed in the back of my mind. The days following the photo were a blur of confusion and disbelief. Jason and I were still living our everyday lives, but it felt like we were merely going through the motions. I couldn't shake the picture out of my mind, nor could I forget her words, nothing weird is going on. It was just a bad angle. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. Allison had always been the one person I could trust implicitly. She and I had spent countless hours talking about everything from work problems to personal struggles, our dreams, our fears, and everything in between. I always thought we were close, that we shared a bond that was unbreakable. But now, with the seed of doubt planted, I started to question every conversation, every glance, every moment I had with her. It wasn't just the photo, though. It was the small things, the things I had dismissed as insignificant. Looking back, I began to see how much had changed. How much I had ignored. There had been that night, just a few weeks ago. It felt like any other evening. Jason had come home from work later than usual, and we had shared a quick dinner before he retired to the couch, saying he was tired and had a big meeting the next day. Allison had been working late, and that was normal. What wasn't normal, however, was when she came home a few hours later and her coat smelled like someone else's perfume. It wasn't hers. It was floral and faintly sweet, with just a hint of something musky. I had brushed it off then, thinking maybe she had bumped into someone at the office or that she had borrowed something from a colleague. But now I wondered, was she already seeing someone else? Was that the source of this perfume? And then there was the time I had accidentally opened her laptop. I hadn't meant to, but as I reached for the coffee mug on her desk, the screen flickered on. I had glanced at it just in time to see a tab with a shopping cart open, full of expensive lingerie. She had quickly minimized the screen, but not before I caught a glimpse. I had tried to dismiss it, telling myself she was just treating herself. Women sometimes bought things for themselves, right? It didn't mean anything. But now, in light of everything, my mind went back to that tab. Why had she hidden it? Why had she minimized it as soon as I walked in? What was she hiding? Was there someone else she had been preparing for? Someone else who would see her in that lingerie? It wasn't just the physical signs. It was the subtle emotional shifts, too. In the past, Allison and I had always been close, connected. But recently, there had been a shift in her behavior that I couldn't ignore. She started spending more time away from the kids, more time on her phone, more time at work. And I didn't want to admit it, but she was becoming distant in a way I hadn't seen before. She no longer called the kids to say goodnight as often. It wasn't that she didn't love them, it was just that she was too distracted, too detached. I kept telling myself it was because of work. The stress was piling up on her, and maybe she needed a break. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just couldn't admit it. Then there was Scott, her new colleague. She had mentioned him a few times, talking about how he had been working with her on a few big projects. I remember the way her voice softened when she said his name, the way her eyes brightened. She'd never done that before. I had always brushed it off as nothing more than friendly office chatter, but looking back, it felt like more. Her tone had a certain familiarity when she spoke of him, as if he were someone who had become more important in her life. I wanted to believe that I was imagining things. After all, she had never given me a reason to distrust her. But these little things, the perfume, the late nights, the secretive behavior, began to pile up until I couldn't deny them any longer. Her phone, too. It used to be that she left her phone on the table when we ate dinner or even just casually placed it on the counter. But lately, she had started keeping it face down. She'd leave it with the screen down at all times like she was hiding something. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just a habit. But then I started noticing how often she would pick it up and quickly glance at it before putting it back down. She was always swiping away messages and notifications as if she were trying to hide something from me. Was it Scott? Was it Derek? Or was it someone else entirely? She had also started going into the bathroom in the evenings with her headphones on as though she didn't want to be disturbed. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. When she'd come out, she would always seem flustered, as if she had been in the middle of something and had to stop. At first, I told myself she was just trying to unwind, taking a moment for herself. But now I wondered, was she really just unwinding? Or was she talking to someone else? Someone she didn't want me to know about? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that these weren't just small things. They were signs I had ignored because I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to face the truth. I didn't want to believe that the woman I trusted, the woman I had known for years, could be the one to betray me. But now the pieces were falling into place. The photo, the perfume, the late nights, the emotional distance. It all pointed to the same thing: something had changed. And as much as I didn't want to believe it, I had to face the reality. Allison was hiding something from me. And that something wasn't just innocent office banter or late-night meetings. It was something far more complicated, far more painful. I sat at my desk, my mind reeling from the flood of thoughts and emotions. I tried to breathe, to calm myself, but I couldn't. My heart was pounding in my chest, my head spinning with all the things I couldn't ignore anymore. I had been in denial for so long, convincing myself that everything would be fine, that I was just overthinking it. But now the truth was staring me in the face. And I couldn't look away. It was clear that I needed answers. I couldn't live like this anymore, walking around with this constant feeling of unease. I needed to confront Allison. I needed to know what was going on, no matter how much it hurt. Because if I didn't, I would continue to live in this limbo, unsure of where we stood, unsure of what she was hiding. I couldn't do that to myself. I owed it to myself and to our kids to find out the truth. It had been days since I'd first seen the photo, but the unease had not subsided. If anything, it had only grown stronger, more insistent. The doubts I had once dismissed had now become more than just whispers in the back of my mind. They were loud, impossible to ignore. I had already started making plans in my head, weighing the options and trying to figure out how to confront Allison. But still, there was a nagging part of me that wasn't sure, wasn't ready to destroy everything just yet. Maybe, just maybe, I was misinterpreting things. I had told myself over and over again that I was overthinking, that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I felt like I was lying to myself. I needed confirmation, something undeniable that would prove what I was already starting to believe, that I wasn't just imagining things. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon. The kids, Logan and Kate, were at their friend's house and the house was quieter than it had been in days. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring my coffee, when I made a decision. I couldn't keep going on like this, unsure, questioning everything. I had to know the truth. There was only one way to get it. I had been hesitant, but I had finally made up my mind. It was time to go to Austin. Allison had flown there for work last week, and I had no reason to think anything was out of the ordinary. I had let her go, trusting that it was just business. But now I couldn't help but wonder. What if the dinner was more than just work? What if she had met someone there? What if I was walking into a situation that I would never come back from? I told myself it was for the kids. I told myself it was for them, for all of us. I wanted them to have a family. I wanted to believe that what we had was still there, that it wasn't too late to salvage it. But there was a darker part of me that wondered if it was already too far gone. I booked the tickets the same day. I didn't tell Allison. She wouldn't be expecting us. I decided to surprise her. I figured a surprise could be just the thing we needed to shake things up, maybe bring back the joy and spontaneity we had once shared. The morning we left was a rush of excitement and anxiety. Logan was thrilled about the idea of going on a surprise trip, even though I hadn't told him the real reason for our visit. Kate, on the other hand, was a little apprehensive but eventually warmed to the idea. I kept my own feelings in check, not wanting to show how tense I felt. The whole time I was wondering what we would find when we got to the hotel. What would I see? What would I find out? Would my worst fears be confirmed, or was I wrong to even suspect? We landed in Austin around noon and the kids were thrilled. I tried to focus on them, on making it a fun family weekend despite the underlying tension. We stayed in a hotel near the conference center where Allison was supposed to be working. She hadn't told me much about where she was staying, but I knew that the receptionist would be able to help. I had asked her once before when I had needed to make changes to a booking, and she had been pleasant but vague. As we checked into our room, I pretended to be excited for the kids, showing them around the spacious hotel suite. I wanted them to feel the same energy they had when we used to travel as a family before all the tension started creeping in. Logan was asking me about the city, about the cool places we could visit, and Kate was excited to see the pool. But I couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at me from the inside. I could barely focus on the kids' excitement. My mind was elsewhere. I had come here for answers, and I knew that I was getting closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. When Logan and Kate went to explore the hotel grounds, I found myself alone in the room. I knew exactly where Allison was staying. It wasn't hard to figure out. I called the front desk, pretending I needed to confirm something with my wife's booking. The receptionist quickly gave me the room number, a room 611. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and stared at the number on the screen. I couldn't help but wonder how it had come to this. How had I not seen it sooner? How had I missed all the signs that were so clear now? Was I so wrapped up in my own world that I hadn't noticed the changes in her? Or had I known deep down but simply refused to acknowledge it? I grabbed the hotel key card, walked out of the room, and left the kids behind with instructions to stay on the hotel grounds. They didn't need to know what was going on. They didn't need to feel the weight of what I was about to discover. The elevator ride up to the 6th floor felt like an eternity. Each second dragged on, and my mind was spinning with every possible scenario. What if I found her there with someone? What if I found out she was already gone, that our whole life together had been a lie? I stepped off the elevator, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway stretched before me, dimly lit and quiet. Room 611 was just a few doors down. As I walked toward it, I could hear the low murmur of voices behind the door. Was she alone? Was someone with her? I knocked. My hand trembled, and I couldn't even tell if I was breathing properly. The door opened a crack, and there she was. Allison. She was in a bathrobe, her hair wet, her face pale with shock. Behind her, there was a man, barely clothed, wrapped in a sheet. His face mirrored the same embarrassment I felt. I stood there frozen. The sound of the music and the faint hum of the air conditioning were the only things I could hear. I didn't need to hear anything else. The man didn't know I existed, didn't know she had a family. But I did. And in that moment, it was like everything came crashing down at once. Allison, flustered, started to explain. She said it was all a mistake, that the man was a colleague, that they had just been talking about a project. But the way she fumbled with her words only made it worse. The room was full of the stench of guilt, the lies spilling out of her mouth, but it was all so clear to me now. This wasn't just a work meeting. This wasn't an awkward angle. This was betrayal. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. I just stood there, looking at her, at the man behind her, and at the life I had built, now shattered into pieces. The man, clearly uncomfortable, started to pull away. He didn't know what to do, how to act. But Allison's face said everything I needed to know. She was embarrassed, but not truly sorry. The trust was gone. There was no going back. The silence in the hallway was deafening as I stood there, processing everything. Allison's frantic explanation felt like it was happening in another universe, one I was watching from a distance, unable to fully comprehend. The man standing behind her, wrapped only in a sheet, was a stranger to me. He had no idea who I was, but in that moment it didn't matter. What mattered was the reality in front of me. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was something deeper, something calculated. Something I wasn't ready to face, but I knew I had no choice now. I turned away, taking in a sharp breath as the weight of everything settled over me like a thick fog. I could hear Allison calling after me, her voice desperate, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? She had made her choice, and now I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. I walked back to the elevator, my mind a blur. I was numb, but at the same time every emotion was too much to handle. Anger, betrayal, shame, confusion. They all fought for dominance inside me, but nothing could compare to the overwhelming sense of loss that I felt. I was losing her, losing us, and I didn't know if I could ever get that back. When I got back to the hotel room, the kids were gone. I knew where they'd gone to explore the hotel grounds as I had instructed them. Logan was old enough to understand the importance of staying close, but Kate, my sweet little Kate, was always excited about new places. I felt a pang of guilt for not being present for them, but at the same time there was no way I could have handled it if they had seen me like this. I couldn't let them know. Not yet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my heart still pounding. I needed to process what had happened, but I didn't know where to start. The truth was right in front of me. The evidence was clear, but I still had to make decisions. I had to figure out what to do next, how to navigate this new, terrifying reality. I couldn't think about it for too long. The kids would be back soon. I couldn't let them see me fall apart. They were already going through enough, and I didn't want them to feel like this was their fault. This wasn't their burden to carry. When they returned, I forced a smile, doing my best to act normal even though everything inside me was screaming to confront Allison, to shout, to demand answers. But the truth was, there was nothing left to discuss. She had already given me all the answers I needed with her actions. That evening, as we ate dinner in the hotel room, I kept up the pretense. Allison still hadn't come back. I had no idea where she was, and I didn't care to find out. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the kids and the fact that I had to keep this facade going for them. They didn't know what had happened. They didn't need to know. At least not yet. Kate, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling just below the surface, chatted animatedly about the things they had seen while exploring the hotel. Logan, on the other hand, seemed quieter than usual. He wasn't saying much, but I could see the way he kept glancing at me. His eyes were sharp. He was older now, and I could tell that something was off. He didn't ask about Allison, but his silence spoke volumes. As the evening wore on, I kept telling myself that I couldn't let this ruin the trip. I couldn't let it ruin everything we had built. But deep down, I knew I couldn't pretend for much longer. The cracks were showing, and no amount of forced cheerfulness was going to make them disappear. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded hollow to me. "Your mom will be back soon," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "She just had to finish up with some work stuff." It was a lie. A small, harmless lie. But I had no other choice. I didn't want to tell them the truth, not yet. Kate, who still believed in the magic of family vacations, nodded enthusiastically. Logan, however, remained quiet, his eyes still on me. He wasn't buying it. I could feel it. That night, after we finished eating, Logan finally spoke up. He didn't ask about Allison, but I could tell he was thinking about it. I had known him long enough to recognize the look on his face. The quiet, thoughtful one that signaled something was wrong, something was on his mind. "I can't sleep," he said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed, his arms crossed. "You think Mom's okay?" I turned to look at him, trying to gauge how much he knew. He had always been perceptive, always seemed to understand more than I gave him credit for. He was getting older, and I knew he could sense when something was off. "She's fine," I said, trying to sound calm. "She's just caught up with work, that's all." Logan's expression didn't change. He didn't seem convinced. "I know Mom," he said softly. "She's been different lately. Not like she used to be." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. I wanted to say something reassuring, something to take the sting away. But I couldn't. The truth was, Logan was right. Allison had been different. I had seen the signs, ignored them, and now it was too late to turn back. "I'll talk to her when we get home," I said, my voice shaky, though I tried to make it sound firm. "I promise." Logan nodded but said no more. He didn't have to. His silence spoke louder than any words ever could. The next morning, Allison still hadn't returned. It was getting harder and harder to keep the lie going, to pretend that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. Logan was starting to withdraw, and Kate, blissfully unaware, continued to ask when Mom would be back. Each time she asked, my heart broke a little more. By the time we boarded the plane to head back home, I was exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I was running on fumes, trying to keep it together for the kids, trying to hold on to some semblance of normalcy for their sake. Allison, when she finally did contact me, kept her messages brief. She wanted to meet, to talk. I had no interest in hearing what she had to say. Whatever explanations she had would never be enough to erase what had happened. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her. At the airport, she showed up to say goodbye, her eyes red from crying, but her demeanor still detached, as though she was trying to pull herself together. Kate hugged her tightly, unaware of the devastation that had unfolded between her parents just hours before. Logan said nothing, but his eyes, those damn eyes, spoke volumes. I didn't need to hear the words. I could feel his disappointment radiating from him. "Mom's staying a little longer," I said to Kate, my voice flat. It was the lie I had to tell, the story I had to stick with for the time being. I felt the weight of the lie in my chest, suffocating me. But I had no choice. Not yet. As we boarded the plane, Logan stayed silent beside me, his gaze out the window, lost in his thoughts. Kate, oblivious, continued to chatter about everything she had seen on the trip. I had to hold it together for them, for her, for us. But deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. We had barely made it back home when the first moment of quiet settled between us. The kids were still buzzing with excitement from the trip, oblivious to the storm that had just passed over us. Logan was still distant, though. He hadn't said much since we left Austin, and I couldn't help but notice how much older he seemed, how much more mature in his silence. It was as though he understood more than I was ready to admit. Kate was the opposite. She was still caught up in the excitement of everything we'd seen. The hotel, the surprise trip, the fun moments she'd had. To her, the world was still a place full of wonder. She had no idea that her parents' world was unraveling, and I wasn't sure when or how I would break that news to her. Once we got home, I did my best to keep up the act, to pretend that everything was fine, that nothing had changed. The house was quiet, too quiet. My mind raced back to the hotel, back to room 611, to the man I didn't know, and to the woman who had once been everything to me. I still couldn't get over the feeling of betrayal, the hollow weight of her lies hanging over me. And yet, there was a part of me that wondered if there was still a way to fix things, to make it all go back to normal. But deep down, I knew better. I knew that normal was gone. I knew that there was no going back. Not after what I had seen. The next morning, Logan surprised me with something I wasn't expecting. He came into the kitchen just as I was preparing breakfast. His expression was serious, and there was a certain heaviness in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes searching mine. I paused what I was doing, unsure of how to respond. I had been avoiding the conversation I knew was coming. The one where Logan would ask me about what happened, where I'd have to face the truth, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. But here it was, his question hanging in the air like a balloon I couldn't escape. "Sure," I said, trying to sound calm, though I could feel my heart pounding. "What's on your mind?" Logan sat down at the kitchen table, his shoulders stiff, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. It was clear he had been holding this in for some time. He had been quiet throughout the entire trip home, and now it was time for him to say what had been bothering him. "I know what's been going on," he said quietly. "I've known for a while." My heart dropped. I was not ready for this. I had been trying to shield him from the truth, to protect him from the pain I was feeling. But it seemed that he already understood more than I could have ever expected. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to stay composed. Logan looked at me, his eyes wide, searching for the right words. "I know about Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know she's been acting weird. And I saw the way she was when we were in Austin. I saw the look in her eyes when she saw you, and I could tell something was wrong." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I wanted to deny it, to tell him it was all just a misunderstanding, that everything would be okay. But I couldn't lie to him, not now. Not when he already knew the truth. "Logan," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. You're too young to deal with all of this." "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad," he interrupted, his voice growing more serious. "I've been watching her. I've seen the way she's been acting. It's been like that for months. I know something's wrong. You don't have to hide it from me." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was right. Logan was no longer the little boy who needed protecting. He was becoming more aware, more insightful, and I couldn't shield him from the truth any longer. He had seen the cracks in our family. He had seen them long before I had fully acknowledged them myself. "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I've been trying to protect you from all of this, but I know you're old enough to see what's going on. And you deserve the truth." Logan sat back in his chair, his hands resting in his lap, his expression softening. "Is it true? What happened with Mom?" I nodded slowly, the weight of the truth settling heavily on my chest. "Yeah, it's true," I said softly. "Your mom, she's been seeing someone else. I found out in Austin." Logan didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, his eyes searching mine as though he were trying to piece everything together. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. "I know you're probably mad at her," I continued, my voice thick with emotion, "but you don't have to feel like you have to choose sides. You don't have to be angry with her if you don't want to be. Logan shook his head slowly, his gaze softening. I'm not mad at her, Dad. I'm just confused. I don't know what to think anymore. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. He wasn't angry, not at me at least. But there was so much he didn't understand, so much I hadn't explained. The last thing I wanted was for him to feel like he had to take sides, that he had to carry this burden. He was still a kid. This wasn't something he should have to bear. We'll figure it out, Logan, I said, my voice firm now, despite the lump in my throat. I'll make sure you and Kate are okay. That's all that matters right now. Logan nodded slowly, though I could tell he was still processing everything. He wasn't fully ready to accept the situation, and neither was I. But I had to be strong for him. For both of them. And Kate? Logan asked, his voice suddenly full of concern. She doesn't need to know yet, I said, my voice steadying. She's too young to understand the full picture. But when the time comes, I'll tell her. We'll both talk to her together. Logan nodded, his eyes distant. I get it. I wish things could go back to normal. Me too, I said softly. But I don't think they can. Not after everything that's happened. For a moment, there was only silence between us. I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. My son, my firstborn, had just grown up in a way I wasn't ready for. But in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't just my son. He was becoming someone I could lean on, someone who could understand the pain I was feeling. I don't know what happens next, Logan, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I'll make sure we're okay. We'll get through this together. Logan smiled softly, his hand resting on mine. I know, Dad. We'll figure it out. And for the first time in days, I believed him. The flight back home was a blur. Logan remained quiet, lost in thought, and Kate was too young to sense the change that had already started to consume our family. I tried to pretend everything was normal, tried to keep up the act for their sake, but each passing moment made it clearer that nothing would ever be the same again. The truth was, I had already started making plans. I had no idea how long I could keep pretending to be okay, how much longer I could lie to myself and to the kids. Allison and I were living in two separate worlds now. There was no more us. She had made her choice, and I had to face the harsh reality that there was no going back. When we finally arrived home, the house felt emptier than I had ever remembered. The familiar smells, the cluttered spaces, the quiet hum of daily life, it all felt like a shadow of what it once was. I walked through the door, and it felt as though the walls were closing in around me. I couldn't stand the thought of being here alone with the memories of what had been. But at the same time, I knew I had to start somewhere. Logan stayed in his room, and Kate quickly went off to play. I stood in the living room for a few moments, letting the weight of it all settle in. I needed to figure out what to do next. I had always believed that no matter what happened, I could work things out with Allison. But now I knew. There was no fixing this. There was no patching the hole in our marriage, not after what had happened. The following day, I did what I knew I had to do. I called a lawyer. It wasn't easy making the first call. It felt like the final admission that things were truly over. That the family I had tried to protect and nurture for so long was now falling apart. But I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't live in this toxic environment anymore. I couldn't live in a lie. Not with the kids and not with myself. The lawyer I spoke to was compassionate but direct. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She explained the process of filing for divorce, the paperwork, the logistics of separating everything: property, finances, custody. There were so many things to think about, so many things I wasn't ready to face. But I had to. For the kids. For me. I set up an appointment for later that week. By then, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this drag on. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage where trust had been shattered. Allison had already made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. As for Allison, she had been calling, texting, trying to arrange a meeting. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I couldn't face her, not yet. I wasn't ready to hear her explanations, her apologies. I wasn't ready to hear her try to convince me that it was a mistake, that she was sorry, that we could work it out. The truth was, I didn't believe her anymore. I couldn't. And I didn't want to. That evening, Logan came to find me. He had a look on his face that I couldn't quite place: concern, maybe, or maybe just a deeper understanding than a 14-year-old should have. He didn't need to ask about Allison. He already knew the answers. Dad, he said quietly, sitting down next to me on the couch. Are you okay? I let out a long breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. I will be, I said. But I need you to know something. What happened between Mom and me, it's not your fault. You don't need to carry this. Logan nodded, his eyes still searching mine. I know. But I don't want you to be alone, Dad. I know you're hurting. We all are. I smiled, the pain in my chest easing just a little. We'll get through it, Logan. I'm going to make sure of that. As we talked, I realized something important. Even though everything had fallen apart with Allison, I still had my kids. I still had a family, even if it looked different now. And that was something worth fighting for. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, waiting for the papers to be finalized. I had been through the motions, the endless discussions about property, finances, custody. It felt like a business transaction more than anything else, a cold exchange of things that no longer mattered. Allison hadn't fought me. She hadn't even tried to keep the house or demand full custody of the kids. She knew the truth. She knew what she had done, and she knew there was no way back from it. That didn't mean the divorce was easy. It wasn't. It never is. But it was necessary. As I sat there, staring at the paperwork in front of me, I thought about everything we had been through. The years of marriage, the kids, the good times and the bad. It all felt like a distant memory now, like a chapter that had already ended. But I wasn't going to let it define me. I wasn't going to let it control the rest of my life. When the lawyer handed me the divorce papers, I took them with a deep breath. I signed them without hesitation, knowing that it was the only way forward. Allison did the same a few hours later. It was over. The marriage. The dream of a family that I had held so tightly to. It was all gone now. But there was something else, something that was growing inside me. It wasn't relief, not exactly, but something close to it. It was silence. A quiet, profound sense of peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't weighed down by anxiety, by doubt, by the constant need to fix things that couldn't be fixed. I was free. And in that silence, a new chapter was starting. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. It was a chapter where I could start over, where I could rebuild, not just for me, but for Logan and Kate as well. We would learn how to be a family again, without the lies. Without the betrayal. As I left the lawyer's office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Not just from the divorce, but from everything. I had given everything I had to that marriage, and now I was letting it go. It wasn't about Allison anymore. It wasn't about the pain she had caused me. It was about moving forward. For myself. For my kids. And for the life I still had yet to live.